England versus Argentina is about something that happened before most of the players standing on that pitch in 2026 were old enough to have seen it. Something that took place on a football field in Mexico in 1986 that the sport has never genuinely put behind it. Something that involved a hand, a goal, and a man who smiled every single time anyone put a microphone in front of him and asked. And when these two countries walked out to meet each other at the 2026 World Cup, none of that history sat quietly in the past the way people like to tell themselves it does. It came out with them. To actually understand what England against Argentina means, you have to go back to June 22, 1986. Azteca Stadium, Mexico City. A World Cup quarter-final between two countries that 6 weeks before that afternoon had been fighting a war with each other over a group of islands sitting in the South Atlantic. The Falklands had been over for 4 years at that point. But things that have been through a war do not close themselves off neatly when the fighting stops. They leave something behind in the space. And when Argentina and England were on the same pitch in that quarter-final, what had been left behind was present in every part of that stadium. What happened during the match has been repeated so many times in the decades since that the facts themselves have started to feel more like myth than record. Maradona getting his left hand to the ball and sending it into the net while the referee was looking somewhere that was not quite the right place. Maradona collecting it in his own half and walking past 5 England players who were still in the positions they had been in when he started moving, then finishing past Peter Shilton. 2 goals, one that should have been pulled back, one that probably should not have been achievable by a human being. 1 match, 2 moments, 40 years of a conversation that 2 nations have been having with each other ever since without once getting anywhere close to agreement on what they actually witnessed. What makes this different from any other rivalry in football is not what sits on the surface of it. Spain against Germany is about which country has the right to consider itself the dominant force in the sport. Brazil against Argentina is about which side of the same continent gets to claim ownership of football's soul. England against Argentina is something that does not slot comfortably into a sporting category. It is the particular feeling that comes from being beaten by someone who did something the rules specifically say you cannot do, and then walked in front of every camera available, and told the world that what you had all just watched was divine intervention. England supporters have been living with that feeling for 40 years. Not the losing is not the issue. England have been through enough of it to have made a kind of peace with the concept. It is the specific experience of watching something happen on a pitch that every single person sitting in the ground that day could see with complete clarity, and having the one individual whose job it was to act on what he saw simply not see it. And then watching the person who did it spend the rest of his public life being perfectly comfortable about it. That kind of thing does not get processed and moved past. It gets transferred from the people who were sitting in the Azteca that afternoon or following it from somewhere back home, to the children who had the story told to them enough times across the years that it lodged itself somewhere. It did not feel like second-hand information. To the players who were on the pitch in 2026, none of whom were born in 1986, all of whom understood perfectly well what they were stepping into before anyone had kicked a ball. Argentina's relationship with this fixture is built on something else entirely. In Argentina, 1986 is not something that sits uncomfortably. It is something the country holds on to with both hands. Maradona is not framed there as someone who bent the rules. He is framed as someone who found a way to get one over on the English at something beyond the sport, and the country has never had the slightest inclination to revisit that framing. The hand of God does not create any awkwardness in Argentina. It is something that gets brought into conversations at tables with real warmth. It is the goal that meant more than what it was worth on a scoreboard. The goal that landed 4 years after the conflict in the South Atlantic and carried, in the way an entire country decided to receive it, a significance that no official on any pitch had the power to hand out or take back. So when these two sides are on the same pitch, they are not actually playing the same match. England are playing a football game with 4 decades of something unresolved sitting directly under every moment of it. Argentina are playing something they have never once felt any pressure to say sorry for. The 2026 match carried every bit of that into it. Every time someone went in for the ball, it felt like it was about more than the challenge itself. Every decision the official made got filtered through the accumulated history of what officials have done and failed to do the other times these particular teams have faced each other. Every still moment in the build-up to kickoff was the kind of stillness that has 40 years of noise stored inside it rather than actual quiet. And when the game got underway, the players on both sides encountered something that preparation and tactical planning, and everything the coaching staff had put in front of them in the days before could not fully get to. That this match does not feel the same as other matches feel. That's something about the weight of it gets to you differently. That players who are completely composed in every other situation sometimes find something they did not expect starting to happen when the kid on the other side of the pitch is that particular kid. What took place on the pitch in 2026 will have people going back and forth about it for years. But the result is less significant than what the match made clear. This is not a rivalry that belongs to a specific period of time. It is something that reactivates every time these two nations end up on opposite sides of a fixture. Every group of players who come through inherits it whether they were looking to or not. Every generation of supporters picks it up and carries it forward whether that was ever a decision they consciously made. The hand of God happened 40 years ago, but it was in that stadium in 2026 when they walked out. It is always in the stadium, and it is not going anywhere, because there are things in football that do not get settled. They just keep building. One tournament at a time, one generation at a time, one layer sitting on top of the last, until the fixture itself is carrying so much accumulated weight that the football very nearly starts to feel like the thing that is happening on the surface, rather than the thing that matters most. Very nearly. But it never quite gets there. Because when the ball actually moves and the match is genuinely happening, it is still football. And football is still the thing that settles it in the end. If this fixture sits somewhere in you, put it below in the comments. And subscribe. Because the things underneath the biggest matches in this sport are always the ones that need the most time and care to tell properly. New video every single day.